Good day, folks, and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. Let's talk about Gerry Rafferty. Born in Scotland in 1947 to an Irish Catholic working-class family, Gerry grew up in both Irish and Scottish folk songs, as well as music by the likes of Beatles and Bob Dylan. That influence would soon lead him to joining folk rock bands in the 60s and 70s, such as the Humble Bums, which also featured a young Binny Connolly, and Stealers Wheel, which you might know for the song Stuck in the Middle with You, aka that song Michael Madsen danced to while torturing a cop in Reservoir Dogs. Tarantino has quite a taste in music. Between each group, however, Gerry made his own debut solo album in 1971 titled Can I Have My Money Back? Interesting title. Despite a positive critical reception, the album didn't sell very well and it soon passed into obscurity. However, after Stealers Wheel broke up in 1975 after 5 years of activity and 5 studio albums, Gerry soon eventually got to start working on another solo album of his by the dawn of 1978 when it would be released. And boy howdy, was it a comeback for him, ranking up to number 6 in the UK albums chart and even number 1 in the US Billboard. This album certainly got him on the map for a while. And we're going to be looking into it today. So let's jump into Gerry Rafferty's 1978 album, City to City. The cover is interesting to say the least, illustrated by John Patrick Byrne, who previously did Gerry's debut album, as well as his next 2 albums following after this, Night Owl and Snakes and Ladders, and he even did cover artwork for both Humble Bums and Stealers Wheel. So you can imagine John and Gerry were quite good friends with each other, and they'd work together this often. And this is no doubt his most iconic, featuring a neat stylization of the artist's name and album title in this very lace-like style that kind of loops all about. Also, Gerry Rafferty's Black Hole Crotch. You may feel free to make your own jokes about that as you may please. But anyways, on to the music itself, shall we? We begin the album with The Ark, and right off the get-go we're greeted with the sweet sounds of fiddles and mandolins, definitely driving home that Scottish-Irish folk influence, not unlike something Mike Oldfield would compose. Then about 40 seconds in, we suddenly get into a piano ballad with an acoustic guitar, just like we've just entered an Elton John record or something, as Gerry himself sings about the dark night coming down on us. Yes, Gerry predicted future Batman stories like The Dark Knight Returns and The Dark Knight Rises. The world is living in its dream. Even the whole entire planet Earth has been living inside the Matrix. Or Inception, possibly both. But now we know that we can wake up from this sleep and set out on a journey, find a ship and take us on the way. Unfortunately, however, there's a storm going on, so all cruises have either been postponed or cancelled. And then there's the chorus, where the music ascends a bit, while Gerry openly declares that we'll sail out on the water, feel the seas roll, and meet out where all the strangers are known. And considering the song's title itself, it's likely this is using Noah's Ark as a symbol of sorts to represent travelling to a newer world together. At least it isn't the Ark of the Covenant, or Gerry would risk having his whole face either melted, sucked up like a vacuum, or just flat out exploded. The song also features an electric guitar by Jerry Donahue of Fairpoint Convention, and the piano itself is played by the late Tommy Ear, who also worked with the likes of Greg Lake, Gary Moore, and even Wham. Jerry's guitar plays along with a fiddle in a sort of duet solo kind of thing, and the drums for the most of the songs in this album are played by Henry Spinetti, who would also play with the likes of Joan Armatrading and Eric Clapton. The electric acoustic nature of the track, combined with its sentimental lyrics, do remind me a little bit of the Pink Floyd song Wish You Were Here. It may not be as well known as the next song, but it's still a very decent tune and good opener to the album regardless. Next, we have possibly Gerry's most well-known song, Baker Street. Even if you don't know it by name, who sang it or who played on it, who played what on it, chances are good you might have heard or listened to it before. It reached number 3 in the UK singles chart, number 2 in the US Billboard, and even number 1 in countries like Canada, Australia, and South Africa. And of course, if one were to bring up and mention this song, immediately the first thing you might think of would be the fantastic saxophone solo, or rather solos. Yes, there are in fact multiple solos throughout this track. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4. Chorus? What chorus? The sax solos are the chorus. And they're done by none other than Raphael Ravenscroft, who I might have mentioned back in my review of Robert Plant's Pictures at 11, where he did a similar solo or two for the song Pledge Pin. He would also be involved in 2 songs in Pink Floyd's 1983 album, The Final Cut, which I hope to cover soon enough this year. As for the lyrics themselves, they seem to be about the feelings of hope and disappointment while using the actual Baker Street as a backdrop or setting. Another crazy day, drinking the night away and forgetting about everything. He must have tried out Coca-Cola's newest flavour, Amnesia Apple Cider. The city desert makes you feel so cold. It's got so many people, and yet it's got no soul. Being a Scotsman in the English city of London must have made Gerry feel a little bit foreign in some way. Used to say and think it would be so easy, and that in a year he would be happy. But he's trying and crying now. Later, he recalls having a dream, a plan of sorts, to buy some land of his own, give up drinking alcohol and having one-night stands, and settle down in a quiet little town, hoping to start a new life and forget about everything. However, he will always keep moving and will never stop doing so, as if that dream is still far away from being achieved and he has to work his way to such. It's honestly quite profound and even relatable the more you think about it. We all want to quit our past addictions and turn over a new leaf. We all want so to be an easy feat. But of course, it isn't. We have to put in the effort to better ourselves, even if it requires other people to support us. No wonder so many people were captivated by this. And on top of all this, we get an equally fantastic guitar solo, an electric guitar solo by Hugh Burns, who aside from working for the likes of Paul McCartney, Mike Oldfield and Pet Shop Boys, also played guitar on the Wham song Careless Whisper. In a way, the song's kind of autobiographical for Gerry himself, feeling like an alienated outsider, a stranger in a strange world. I'd say I'd recommend this song, but let's face it, we've all listened to it before, even if we don't know it by name. Then we have Right Down the Line, the follow-up single to Baker Street. And while not as well known as that song, this is still underrated in its own right. A soft reggae-inspired track featuring a licking steel guitar by BJ Cole, drums by Liam Ginocchi of Steel Eye Span, and a nice organ by Tommy Eyre. This has a mellow mood similar to, say, Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits, which I also might get back to later this year. It's a simple love song where Gerry sings out his humble heart about how important someone is to him. As he puts it, this is his way of telling you, us, everything he could never say before. The brightest light that shines, as constant as a northern star. You believed in me through my darkest night and put something better inside of me. Oh, I imagine she put something inside you, Gerry. And the place to put it in exactly. You brought me into the light and threw away all those crazy dreams. Dreams of turning up at the recording studio only to realize you're wearing nothing but boxer shorts with polka dots. Oh, and that you forgot to bring the music sheets as well. Anyway, this is such a beautiful song, and yet I somehow feel it doesn't get quite enough appreciation. It definitely deserves a chance to listen to, especially if you're either driving in a late, nice evening and you need a track to listen to and relieve some stress with, or if you're sitting outside watching the sunset and all. I definitely recommend this alone. Afterwards is the title track, City to City. This one does have a bit of a western country vibe to it, starting off with a union of fiddles playing along a nice melody and even mimicking the sound of a train whistle at one point. Then we get a range of rhythmic, electric, and acoustic guitars on top of keyboards and drums as Gary sings that the night train is waiting to take him away, but expresses guilt because you want him to stay, or rather, someone close to him wants him to stay, and he himself knows so. So logically, a third option that could make everyone happy would be either the night train stays with Gary here, or that Gary takes his close person with him on said night train. There's always an alternative, right? But when the wheels start turning, taking him through the night, out there in the darkness, there's a star shining bright, and it makes him feel better just to see it up there. Jeff Lynne's probably going to be mighty jealous of Gary if it's the same starlight that he sung about. In the chorus, he gives a very assuring goodnight, saying that the train's going to carry him home, take him home, because he doesn't remember. He's been a prisoner all his life, and he can say to you, but he doesn't remember. Among the people doing the backing vocals in this track are fellow former Steel Wheel member, the late Rap Noaks. I'm probably butchering that name wrong. It seems to be a trend on my show. And the also late Vivienne McCauliffe. Again, butchered that name awfully wrong. I'm not Scottish or Irish or anything. Who was a brief member of jazz fusion band Affinity and also provided some guest vocals for a few albums by former Yes and Moody Blues member Patrick Moraz. We also get a nifty harmonica solo by Paul Jones of 60s band Manfred Mann, which definitely enhances the country/Americana feel in this, a bit like Steely Dan or Donald Fagen's own solo stuff. Like with Baker Street, this is likely inspired by Gary's own life at the time, feeling like a stranger so far away from what he considers home, travelling from place to place, hence the City to City title. So this is likely about him waving farewell to the world he explored as he rides a long train back to Scotland. That feeling of comfort and assurance, just knowing that you're just one ticket away from it. So if you're on a long journey, be it driving all the way or going on a train ride, put this on your music playlist, if you have one of course, and give it a play and listen. Side 1 ends with Stealing Time, a slow, soft and sweet song, where we hear a quiet yet innocent keyboard playing along a little melody, filling us with utter peace and bliss. Here, Gary sings with full comfort and just as much serenity as the overall music, admitting that he has been stealing time, but he doesn't feel any guilt because the time was his. Then how could he be stealing something that already belonged to him in the first place? Was it some kind of weird embezzlement thing going on? Anyway, he kept down low, walked right out, and let it go. Boy, this early demo for the Frozen song is interesting. Is he also going to sing Into the Unknown too? He watched the sky every day, let the world roll by, the sun and rain, and it felt so good to know that magic again. I guess like Jeff Lynne, Gerry Rafferty was also happy to see Mr. Blue Sky again. That's twice in a row I made an ELO reference within this episode. This also features a bit of an acoustic guitar by Mickey Moody of Whitesnake fame, on top of Tommy's returning to play piano here. And the guitars of BJ Cole and Hugh Burns are just beyond tranquility. In a way, these first 5 songs within the side A of this album seem to tell a general story of sorts. The arc is the beginning of Gerry's journey forth into the world. Baker Street is when he immediately realizes that this world, full of promise and glamour, isn't really all it's cracked up to be. Right down the line has him trying to settle down with a relationship. City to City is him giving his romantic interest a farewell as he goes on a journey back to his home. And Stealing Time is when he finally makes it back to his own home and feeling a sense of freedom and clarity and conclusion. At least that's how I interpret it. Gerry himself probably didn't mean it exactly that way, but still. This is such a beautiful, melodic song and a good way to end the first half. Take some time to listen to Stealing Time. It might steal your time, but it might also steal your heart.